Hey everybody, happy Friday. I wanted to give you a breakdown on a really interesting study that came out. It was 2019. When was this? January 2019. So a very recent study that looked at probiotics and how effective they are in the fight against obesity. So pandemic is a really big word right now. And I wanted to highlight that worldwide obesity is really a pandemic affecting approximately 1 in 3 individuals. So I wanted to give you more background as to why I believe shifting the gut microbiome in terms of using key probiotics is really important in terms of weight loss. We've covered this in another video, but I wanted to give you a breakdown of the study, and I'm happy to link it as well if you're interested in diving more into it. But we really do see in obesity that there's structural and functional changes in the gut microbiome that we can measure on DNA-based stool testing. So essentially you poop in a container and we look at the differences in gut microbiome. So this research really started in mice. So they looked at mice that they actually made them have no gut microbiome, and they looked at the effects of that in terms of the immune system. But they also found that those rats and mice that didn't have that favorable gut environment tended to overeat, as well as they were more likely to extract the calories from the foods they eat, more insulin resistance, meaning risk of prediabetes and inflammation. So these studies have thus been translated into humans as well. And we actually are, interestingly enough, seeing patients who undergo bariatric surgery, so stomach stapling, making the stomach smaller. They actually see that not all the positive shifts in terms of weight loss come from the structural component of making the stomach smaller. They actually see in those patients that their gut microbiome shift, and that some of the favorable outcomes in terms of weight loss actually come from the change in gut microbiome, which is really interesting. So we use probiotics in the metabolic reset program to shift the gut microbiome in a more favorable way, to make sure that you're extracting the appropriate amount of calories from the foods you eat. When you do eat carbohydrates, they're processed as energy instead of stored as fat, as well as these probiotics really create favorable changes in terms of leaky gut, so the spaces between your intestinal cells, your immune system, as well as cholesterol and hormone changes. So this research, we're going to talk about how these probiotics actually change your satiety cues. So I would recommend that we continue them in maintenance, because we know individuals who have struggled with weight loss resistance, one of the things that persists is that you, even after having weight loss, you have more of a hormone called leptin. You have more of a hormone called ghrelin and less of a hormone called leptin, which impacts your satiety for up to 9 years. So this is why we're often seeing yo-yo dieting, because you don't have the same satiety and hunger cues post weight loss. So we can get you to lose weight, but unfortunately, if we don't continue to support your satiety, that increase in satiety will remain up to 9 years later. So one of the ways that probiotics works is they help to lower ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone, and raise leptin, your satiety hormone, so that you are preventing overeating or increased appetite. So let's dive into what this article is saying. So the first thing that I've highlighted here is commensal just means your normal healthy bacteria. So your normal healthy bacteria really dictate metabolic functions. So not only hormone shifts, but your gut microbiome supports the synthesis of vitamin K, which is important for bones and cardiovascular, folate, biotin, these are B vitamins, as well as the absorption of some of your key minerals. So you need a healthy gut microbiome to absorb your B vitamins, as well as things like magnesium, calcium, iron, as well as the reason why this is so important is if I share this diagram that many of you are familiar with, this is the Krebs cycle. So this is how the cells within your cells, called mitochondria, take your fats and carbohydrates and burn them as energy. We don't want to burn too much protein, but the point is here, you need to have amino acids, so these things in green, to help burn your fats and carbohydrates. You need magnesium, you need your B vitamins, B2, B3 to run this cycle. So we have to go back to, okay, why might you be deficient in these vitamins? Is there not enough in your nutrition plan? That's why we're focusing on whole foods. But maybe your gut microbiome isn't in a favorable way, because they produce a lot of these key vitamins and minerals that help you to burn your stored energy and your carbohydrates that you eat in your nutrition plan as energy or ATP. So it's not all about, okay, you're deficient in these vitamins, let's give them to you. Let's support the right gut environment so that you can produce these on your own, as well as absorb them from the foods you eat. So always asking why do individuals have less diversity in terms of their gut microbiome? Why are we seeing more people needing probiotics? Well, oftentimes it comes down to antibiotic use. If you've had a lot of antibiotic use as a child, that can dictate it. If you were born via C-section or not breastfed for a long enough period of time, or perhaps not at all, then we see different changes in your gut microbiome. Also, our environment with using a lot of sanitizers and Lysol, that can really impact in terms of what your gut health is. And we use a lot of antibiotics in terms of animals, preventing them from transmitting any disease or illnesses, as well as we can find pesticides and herbicides and glyphosates that can also negatively impact our gut microbiome, as can any artificial sweeteners like aspartame. So this comes down to a lot of the things that are going on in our environment. So oftentimes it's hard to get a good microbiome on our own. We're also moving away from consuming a lot of fermented foods. So my recommendation for you is try to consume more fermented foods like sauerkraut or kimchi would be a great start. Take your probiotic, as well as don't be afraid to go out in nature and get dirty, right? So the soil microbes that we're exposed to when we're out in nature, or we're gardening, or we're in contact with dirt really helps to build a healthy, robust gut microbiome as well. So we want to be safe, and we want to make sure that we're washing our hands, but we also have to be mindful of how these antimicrobials and the antimicrobial soaps that we're using, especially ones that contain thimerosal, are really impacting our gut microbiome, as well as, it's in our environment. It's the sterile environment that we're trying to create. So we have to be mindful of those shifts. So back to this research study here. First point is that our gut microbiome is really important for making sure that we're absorbing some of those key vitamin minerals that are needed for really healthy overall health, as well as making sure that we're maintaining a lean, healthy body composition and really good energy. B vitamins, iron, folate, magnesium, these things are really important for energy and mood as well. So next one is that another important step that the gut microbiome does is when we consume fibers are just polysaccharides, that's what they're saying here. When we consume fibers, that is the fuel source for our gut microbiome. So we consume fibers, our bacteria in our gut ferment it, and then they produce things like short chain fatty acids. So they're just called short chain fatty acids. So you can think of, you consume fiber, your bacteria ferment it, and produce short chain fatty acids. And these short chain fatty acids are really important for maintaining a nice, healthy, tight junction in your gut. If you have leaky gut and your spaces are open, that gives an opportunity for bacteria and food particles to get through. That triggers inflammation, which we've noticed as well, low-grade inflammation in those with obesity, as well as can create things like food sensitivities. Your intestinal cells should be tight so that food particles aren't getting through and triggering the immune system when they shouldn't. So these short chain fatty acids, there's 3 of them primarily that we measure: propionate, acetate, and butyrate. Propionate is really important for providing an energy or a fuel source for your body to help to synthesize lipids, so breaking down your own fats, producing lipids, as well as helping to break down carbohydrates into glucose. Acetate is really important for cholesterol synthesis. So if we're seeing changes to your cholesterol levels, higher levels of cholesterol than that we would like, probiotics are actually indicated there as well. And so there's some great research there. And of course, butyrate is one of those short chain fatty acids that's so good at healing up that intestinal lining. So making sure that we're having really good gut microbiome, so these spaces are really nice and tight. Now, these gut microbiomes, if you have a good bacteria, you have good short chain fatty acid production, then that will control your energy balance. So how much energy you're burning off, as well as your food intake. It can really impact ghrelin. Ghrelin you can think of as that, I always think of it as, that awful, it's the Care Bears guy, you know, the villain in the Care Bears, that little gray guy that's always causing issues. I think of that as ghrelin. He's the one that drives up your appetite and really promotes some of those food cravings that you otherwise wouldn't want. So that's why the satiety signaling is really important, that these gut microbiomes help to promote. Also, these short chain fatty acids we see here, they really do regulate your body's ability to break down your own fat stores. The more short chain fatty acids you have, the more your metabolism is going to be higher, the more energy expenditure you're going to have, as well as reduced satiety. So up energy, satiety goes down, as well as your blood sugar maintains more of a stable rate when we have good, healthy gut bacteria. Here, this is talking about how when you have lower levels of specifically bifidobacteria, you're going to see more ghrelin, that hunger hormone, go up, as well as we're going to see issues in terms of constipation. So we want to make sure that we're supporting bifido to make sure that we keep our appetite at a nice, easy level. You don't want to suppress appetite artificially, but we want it at a nice level so that you are more in control of your food choices versus feeling like something else is controlling your body in terms of, oh, something else has driven me to the refrigerator to eat when I really didn't want to make that choice otherwise. We're also seeing individuals who have a high carbohydrate, high fat diet. This leads to issues with gut microbiome. So if you are coming to the Reset program from the standard North American diet, maybe more carbohydrates, more fats in your nutrition plan, and you're finding that, wow, we're really restricting fats and carbohydrates for the 6 weeks of the losing phase. Yes, we're doing that in order to reestablish a new healthy gut microbiome so that when we add them back in a way that feels right for you in terms of your maintenance, we're going to have favorable shifts. So you absorb less calories from the foods you eat, less inflammation, less prone to gaining that weight back. So it's restrictive in terms of lowering fats and lowering carbohydrates, and it's intentionally for those 6 weeks to reestablish a new baseline healthy level of gut microbiome. So again, when we don't see really good diversity, we have increased uptake of fatty acids. So you consume fats, you're actually going to pull more of those fatty acids from the foods you eat. So that's more calories than you otherwise would need, as well as more fat storage and ultimately obesity. Here, we're also seeing that obesity has been linked to low-grade inflammation. That's because these tight junctions are opening. And then we see more LPS, which is just, something that the bacteria cells carry on their membrane. So if you have the wrong type of bacteria and they have all this LPS on their outer shell, now your spaces are open. That gets through your intestinal cells, trigger your bloodstream, and then we're seeing something called metabolic endotoxemia, which just means low-grade inflammation because too much of that bacteria that contains the LPS is getting through and triggering your immune system. High-fat diets, we see more of that LPS. We see more absorption of those fatty acids. So individuals who have been on a really high-fat diet, a ketogenic-based diets are really only successful if they're maintained long-term. As soon as you go off that ketogenic diet, you have the gut microbiome that's primed to absorb lots of calories from the foods that you eat. So I like a ketogenic diet for what it's intended for. Really, those who are dealing with seizures and epilepsy, if you can't maintain that long-term, you are more likely to gain the weight back because of these shifts in the gut microbiome. So we really want to support really good populations of bifidobacterium and lactobacillus so that we have lower levels of inflammation, because we know inflammation, we retain water from that. So if you are always walking around inflamed, you're going to be holding on to water. So as soon as the Reset program, we really suppress that level of inflammation, a lot of that big drops that you're seeing, especially initially, yes, some of that is water weight, but that's really great because we're lowering that level of inflammation so that if you do eat a food that spikes your inflammation, we see the increase in weight, we can pick that up and hopefully figure out what works right for you in terms of keeping that inflammation down. The other interesting thing is we know that when you have really good gut microbiome, you actually have more of something called conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA. So CLA is a supplement that's been marketed and targeted as this dream weight loss supplement. Now, if we can look at, why are individuals low in CLA and why is CLA effective for weight loss, it has to do with when you have a healthy gut microbiome, you have more CLA, and that's anti-obesity or has anti-obesity effects. So the goal is not to say, okay, just take CLA. Let's support a healthy gut microbiome so that we can naturally produce more on our own. It's been shown to increase energy metabolism, increase energy expenditure, so you actually move more, you fidget more, you burn more calories throughout the day, as well as lipolysis. So lipo means fat cell, so you'll break down more of your fat cells if you have enough gut microbiome that's in a really healthy state to produce more CLA. CLA has also been really interesting studies in terms of lowering cholesterol as well. Here, we're also seeing that we have to be mindful of the type of probiotic that we're seeing. So some of the research has been shown that lactobacillus is really great, but we don't want to have too much lactobacillus without bifidobacterium. So there's rat studies, which are really interesting, looking at obesity gut transplant. What they did is they actually took the feces from an obese rat, transferred it into a lean rat, and then that lean rat became obese, didn't change its diet or exercise. And what they looked at is, why was that? And they actually found that the obese rat had a change in the distribution of bacteria, which we call the FB ratio. So why I'm mindful of making sure that you have a probiotic that's balanced with bifidobacterium and lactobacillus, even though lactobacillus has good research on it, is lactobacillus can actually on its own raise that FB ratio, which is not what you want, because if you raise that ratio, there's going to be more calories extracted from the foods you eat, more insulin resistance, more prediabetes. So lactobacillus is great, but we need to balance it out with bifidobacteria. So the tummy tone, as well as the tummy tone and the Probiomed 50 is a really nice balance of primarily bifidobacteria, but some lactobacillus as well. And we've seen that lactobacillus actually supports more bifidobacterium. So it's great if you have both, but I don't want you, if you're switching off of the tummy tone or the Probiomed 50, to just get any probiotic. If you are going to the health food store looking for a probiotic, you want to choose the one that has the most bifidobacterium possible. Don't get one that's all lactobacillus. That's not going to be helpful for you. Even though there's some studies on lactobacillus, the studies that support lactobacillus are only because that lactobacillus supports bifido. So I'd rather you have bifido. If you have any questions about that, let me know. So again, here, bifidobacteria, this is really interesting. So if we're looking at children who are obese or overweight, children who have the highest amount of bifido were actually the leanest. And children who are born via vaginal birth and breastfed have more bifidobacteria than children who are born via C-section and bottle fed. So one of the things that we might want to look at if a child's born via C-section is making sure that we're supplementing with a probiotic that's bifidobacterium. So they are preventing obesity in the future, which I think is really fascinating. So there's more studies in here talking about children and obesity and the differences in their gut microbiome. And of course, the immune system is a really big topic right now. And a lot of our immune system actually resides in the gut through something called secretory IgA. So you want to balance secretory IgA. You don't want too high of an overreactive immune system, because that's where we're going to see things like autoimmune conditions. So your body's not able to determine self from non-self and starts attacking its own tissues. We can see overreactions such as eczema, allergies, asthma, if we have too heightened of an immune system, or it's responding in too heightened of a way. We want to have it nice and balanced. So one of the ways to do that is to support your gut microbiome with lactobacillus. Now, coming into the winter months, one of the reasons that I really like the tummy tone or the Probiomed 50 is because there are strains in those probiotics that have been clinically studied to reduce the severity as well as the duration of influenza. Now, that does not correlate directly. I'm not saying that this will prevent you from getting sick in terms of COVID of any way, but if we can increase your body's resiliency to another virus that is not the same as the coronavirus, that will be helpful as well, because we know that on top of coronavirus, obviously we're dealing with typical colds and flus that are coming in. So I want to share that research with you as well for those particular strains. And here it is. So here we're seeing the Lactobacillus plantarum has been shown to enhance the immune system's response in terms of influenza, especially in the elderly, as well as Lactobacillus acidophilus may significantly reduce the incidence and duration of cold and flu symptoms, which is fantastic, especially for kids during this time of back to school. So last thing that I wanted to talk about was that the other benefit of probiotics is they've actually been shown to inhibit a variety of pathogens, so bacteria that are not beneficial to us and actually are harmful. So Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium have both been shown to be helpful against E. coli, Salmonella, H. pylori, rotavirus, listeria. So that's really great. So the way they do that is by strengthening the immune system. Out competing for resources is another way, as well as modulating inflammation in the gut, creating a more favorable environment for the good guys to grow versus the quote unquote bad guys or the pathogens. So again, to wrap this all up, Lactobacillus reduces body weight, reduces ghrelin, our hunger hormone, and helps with leptin satiety. One of the reasons why individuals can yo-yo diet or they see an increased weight post losing weight, because it's really hard and it takes a long time for your leptin, your satiety hormone, to come back up. So if you have been dealing with obesity for a while, we can get you to lose the weight, but we need to support a really good leptin satiety hormone and a low ghrelin, that crazy hunger hormone, for a number of years after, to make sure that you have a balanced appetite to prevent overeating. So a great way to do that is keeping up with your proteins, keeping up with your fibers, and continuing with the probiotic to help modulate that. And there's some other stuff here. So this is looking at moms who are pregnant and took a probiotic. They actually showed, so you had pregnant women who took a probiotic containing Lactobacillus rhamnosus, and then they looked at the children who were born and how they were doing over the 10 years. And they actually showed that pregnant women who took Lactobacillus rhamnosus helped to modulate their child's weight gain during the first few years of life, as well as prevented excess weight gain in terms of the child later in life, which is, I just think that's so fascinating. So what I'll do is I will link this over. Again, we're repeating the same things. Bifidobacteria, Lactobacillus, a healthy gut microbiome will help with metabolic syndrome, which includes changes to your cholesterol, obesity, inflammation, as well as issues with blood sugar. Probiotics are really, really fantastic. And to always take it one step further, I really try hard not to say, you have to take this supplement, because I believe that if we're living a whole foods, healthy, anti-inflammatory lifestyle, we should have a good microbiome, and we should be able to detox, and we should be able to get all of the nutrients that we need from our foods. But the reality is, in 2020, our environments have hindered that possibility a little bit. We're not living like cavemen anymore. We're exposed to antimicrobials all the time in our foods, in our water, on our surfaces. So yeah, the more healthy you can live, the less need you're going to have in terms of these probiotics. But being balanced, I do feel that majority of individuals do really, really well when they continue on a probiotic. So I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, please let me know. And if you found reviewing some of these scientific articles helpful, I hope I can put this into terms where it's easy to understand. And I feel that the more empowered you are in terms of knowing your own body and knowing what the research says and why you're taking what you're taking, that's always helpful too. So I hope that was good. Let me know your feedback. I'm happy to do more as I read more articles. I'm like, I just have to share these. So anyways, I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon.